On behalf of the Central Indiana region of the Porsche Club of America, welcome to our second Evening With series. A lot of you guys were here last year when Paul Page was here. I expected Paul, he may even show up. Paul has become kind of a friend of the club. Even though he doesn't own a Porsche, he owns one of those Italian cars with a lot of vowels in it that spends an inordinate amount of time in the shop. I can say I did see it at a Cars and Coffee once, although I did not see Paul actually driving the car. So we're not really sure it runs. We're trying to talk him into buying a Porsche. But Paul was so impressed with us, he does attend a lot of our events. We really have to thank the Bazille Westfield Playhouse and Main Street Productions for partnering with us on this terrific facility. Great date night, by the way, is coming to one of their plays here. It's community theater at its best. There's no question. This facility is terrific. By the way, there's some legal stuff that I have to tell you. On the outside chance there's an emergency, and I don't expect any, exits over here, over there, there's some back there, so all right, we're legal now. As you guys came in, you probably saw a table over to the north side of the lobby. 100% of our ticket sales tonight is going to the Cody Unser First Step Foundation. Cody, at age 12 in 1999, was stricken with, and I'm going to look at my notes here, traverse myelitis. Did I pronounce that right? Yep. And literally, she woke up and was paralyzed from the waist down. But being an Unser, and they're kind of a strange breed, the Unser family. After all, they've won, believe it or not, 9.5% of every 500-mile race run was won by somebody named Unser. That tells you something about this family. Well, Cody, being an Unser, rather than pity on herself or anything like that, she just dove right in, started a foundation to help people with spinal issues and problems, and kind of quality of life sort of stuff. So out in the lobby, we have a table out there. There's a representative from the foundation. Loosen up your wallets. I believe they're taking credit cards too. So if you care to make a donation to the foundation, we would really like it. I think Al would like it, and certainly Cody. We have to thank Sonex. Our friends from Sonex are down here. Raise your hand. There we go. Yep. Sonex USA is headquartered right down the street here in Westfield. They make easily the best car care products in the world, and without their help tonight, this would not be happening. So, thank you so much. We're going to bring one of their guys up here and talk to them. As a matter of fact, right now, Rob, come on up. Rob McCrary, he's the big honcho boss man of Sonex USA. Tell us a little bit about how good you guys are.
Well, certainly happy Mother's Day to all your mothers out there. Sonex sees some familiar faces, people that have been to our place down the road, and Sonex is getting ready to celebrate their 75th anniversary in just north of Munich, Germany, and I think it's the best car care product in the world. They make over 600 liquid products, if you can imagine that. So, and everything they make works, which is kind of cool from a car care standpoint. So, anyway, certainly not here to listen to me. Al, certainly a pleasure to have you, and certainly an honor to be a part of this. So, thank you all for coming.
Now, to really get things kicked off tonight, I need to bring a gentleman up here who owns a Porsche. He's a member of the CIR. He also believes that Waffle House is one of the world great restaurants, and very similar in quality to St. Elmo's, but cheaper. I agree with him on one of those points. Funny how every time it's his turn to buy lunch, he's busy. And, you know, what can I tell you on that? He's also the world's living authority on finishing second in the Indianapolis 500-mile race. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend, Mr. Scott Goodyear.
Give me this. Give me the mic. Good evening. I'm actually, after that comment, I'm sitting beside Al, and he looks at me and goes, gosh, that was harsh. And I go, yeah, absolutely. But thank you all for coming here this evening. Really hats off to Larry and to Tom and everybody putting this program together. As you guys know, we did this last year and had Paul Page here. It was a lot of fun, and I was telling a colleague of mine just the other day that you know, it was nice to listen to Paul, and he went on. We were probably up here for an hour and 30 minutes or something of that nature. I heard a lot of stories I had not heard before, so that's a neat thing for me for sitting in the audience and listening to Paul like we all did. I worked with Paul for quite a few years, so it was sort of neat to hear all those stories. In my profession of driving cars and then getting into television, get to meet some incredible people and work with some incredible people. And like a friend of mine to stand up tonight and introduce them, I'd like to introduce them, Alan Bestwick, that did everything with NASCAR, and then also the voice of the 500. And Alan's in town doing the race on the weekend, and then also doing all the PA system for the Indianapolis 500 throughout the whole month. So great to have him in town and get a chance to see him, because we don't see each other but probably twice a year these days. So thank you for coming out tonight. You know, Unser Jr., well, the Unser family. I will share a couple of things with you. Just for me, from my standpoint, when I was watching IndyCar races and hoping to get to the Indianapolis 500 at some point in time, you certainly knew about the Unser family. I got to watch them on television and see all the 500s being won by the family themselves. And, you know, I know Al Jr. started there in 1983, and I started there as a rookie in 1990. The amount of oval experience that Al had compared to me, which was a road course guy that was actually racing in Canada and in Europe, sort of after 1992, sort of wish that I had grown up on an oval track, right? Because it was like this road course guy chasing one of the best guys in the business here in 1992 was a lot of fun. Still today, I think the 1992 race, I know from my standpoint, most of the stuff that I get in the mail today from all the fans is wrapped around 1992. I think you and I had that conversation before. It's still a race that after all these years, everybody seems to remember. Incredible, I think, for me, that every time IndyCar goes to a different country, like when they started doing Brazil and Australia and Japan and everything of that nature, you get a new host of fans that actually show up and want to start to know a little bit more about IndyCar racing. And for me, I was always getting 1992 in the mail, so that tells you where they get the pictures after all these years. It's sort of incredible. So, but I got a chance to watch the Unser family, then race against the Unser family, and then my very first drivers meeting going into an IndyCar when it was CART back then, just looking around the room and seeing all the names and the Unsers that were sitting in the room was pretty incredible, just from this kid coming from Canada. Al and I have got to know each other quite a lot over the last few years and become friends. He was involved in the F3, F4 series that I've been working and running with here in the last couple of years. So generally, I know when my phone was going off and I'd look at it during a race weekend, Al was going to give me shit about something. So it was like, do I answer this or do I not answer this type thing, you know? So it was certainly a lot of fun. His expertise in the series with the team that he was with was greatly appreciated. you know, the fun times I think right now that we have wrapped around 1992 is interesting. And every time we see each other, I look at him, and obviously Larry gives me a hard time about, you know, not buying lunch, but I've learned from one of the best actually here, because every time I see Al, I always say to him, you know what, you know, usually guys win Indy by 5 seconds or 10 seconds, a half a lap or something like that. You know, being side by each, basically, my front wheel beside your rear wheel, I mean, that's as close as it can ever come. I mean, we got to share a little bit in that prize money. At least you need to buy at lunch, right? It hasn't happened yet, although he did tell me when he heard that I like Waffle House, he leaned over and said to me, well, I'll buy you breakfast at Waffle House. So we're getting somewhere here out of this whole program, right? So this is pretty good. But it's always a lot of fun when we talk about 1992. You know, walking in and seeing the picture here. I always tell the story very quickly that in 1992, we obviously got a ton of media, and it was interesting. I was living in Toronto at that point in time, and I had a guy from Sports Illustrated come up and do an interview, and I'm sure he came and visited Al, and they saw this picture, and I had it upside down behind my office chair. And so we got through the whole interview, and the guy said to me, do you know your picture's upside down? I said, yeah, the blue and silver car is leading the blue and white car going that way, so, which I wish that day had happened. So for 92, certainly a lot of fun. We still have a lot of good times about it. I will tell you that we did something earlier in this year, and we were doing a radio show, and they said to us, at this point, when we say this, we'd like you guys to come up, and we're going to introduce you. So I'm sitting there in the audience waiting, and you know, and they're going through the intro and what have you, and then well before that point, Al gets up and walks up and sits in the chair, and I'm thinking, did I make that wrong or off cue or what have you? So anyways, the point comes, and then my proper point, you know, where you said, oh, I walk up on the stage and I sit down, and without missing a beat, he turns to me and goes, second again. So incredible as that is. This evening we've got Tom Beeler, and I met Tom quite a few years ago, and Tom, I think, is almost like a junior historian, knows so much about the Indianapolis 500. I almost call him a book of knowledge, because I certainly called him a lot, even when I was doing television. His passion for the sport of motor racing and his knowledge is second to none, really. So we've become friends in the last few years, and has one hell of a car collection, I might add, too. So I'd like to see that, along with quite a few pace cars. Just a lot of passion and a lot of love for the sport and a lot of love for racing in this room tonight. So I can't think of anybody better than Tom to do the interview tonight with one of the true legends of the Indianapolis 500 and IndyCar racing, Unser Jr. So I'll welcome them both up into the stage.
Al, if you'll take center stage. This is only a little intimidating for me because I have attended over 50 Indy 500s. My dad had worked at the track hospital. I worked in the media center for over 25 years. And I've got Scott Goodyear and Alan Bestwick here to critique whatever I do tonight, these guys with extremely deep broadcasting and interview skills. And I'm with, as Scott said, completely accurately, one of the great legends of the Indianapolis 500. Al Unser Jr. Won 2 Indy 500s, 1992 and 1994. Beyond that, had Super V Championship, Can-Am Championship. You were on the winning team at the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona twice. You have competed in Winston Cup. This is an extraordinary career, but I want to get back to the beginning when you are Al Unser's son, and at the point that you started racing in IndyCars, he'd won 3 times. But tell us what it was like growing up in Albuquerque as the nephew of a 3-time winner and the son at that point of a...
Well, first off, happy Mom's Day, and thanks for having us. I'd like to introduce Norma. Norma, stand up, my bride. She's kind of learning all this kind of stuff, so she enjoys coming to it and all that kind of stuff. And well, I don't know. we lived on the west side of Albuquerque. I had a mini bike when I was about 8 years old, and I came home one day from school, and I saw it. My dad, he said, "Well, you should have done better in school because you're grounded from this mini bike." So that's kind of the way it was with Dad. He was very, very much disciplined, you know, kind of thing, and school came first beyond anything. And so, you know, having Uncle Bobby and Dad, it was just, I don't know any other way, so I don't really know how to describe it. I mean, they were. My dad was a great parent and all that kind of stuff. A little too strict, I thought, you know, sometimes, especially when it was that mini bike. But right when I was 9 years old, there was a go-kart track that was built about a mile from my house, and so we started go-kart racing right when I was 9, and so that's the way it went. My first Indy 500 was 1973, and that's when I was starting to race go-karts. And so my sisters, when I say we, my sisters and I, we would spend the summer with Dad going racing until I started racing go-karts. And then I had a choice. Dad goes, "You can come with me to the races, or you can stay in town and race the go-kart." And I said, "Well, I want to race the go-kart. I don't want to go watch you race, you know, I want to race." And so that's the way it was. You know, I went from the go-kart straight into a sprint car, and when I was 16 years old, and we were able to adapt to that really well. And I remember the local racing club there in Albuquerque. They wanted to stop me from competing because I was too young, you know, and so it ended up being that as long as I had a valid driver's license, which I did, to have the insurance cover us, then it turned into just a club rule at that point, and they had a vote, and I barely had enough votes to show up the next weekend, and basically that's what they were going to do, is just watch me run, and if you know, if I was a hazard or something like that, then they would set me down, but we weren't. We were able to adapt to it pretty quickly, and so I went on racing the sprint car for the next 3 years.
And how much feedback did your dad and your mom give you related to a racing career? Were they pro, con? How did they feel?
Well, first off, my mom was all for it. Okay, she was used to my dad and all that kind of thing, and so Mom was all for it. She didn't like it when I crashed. Okay, but we were fortunate enough that we didn't crash all that often, and so Dad, I mean, simply put, Dad taught me everything that I know, but he didn't teach me everything he knows. And that really became apparent when I started competing against him. And why I say that is when I was running the sprint car, the Super V, the Can-Am, that sort of thing, Dad would offer advice to me. He would say, you know, "I've noticed this, you're going through the corner this way and you should try something else," or what have you. He would offer it. When I started racing against him, he quit offering the advice. And so then what I had to do is I had to ask the question. If I asked the right question or any question, he would give me a straight answer. So that was, you know, that was really good. He never tried to mislead me in any way. You know, he wanted to help me. And so yeah. So
It wasn't like you weren't getting advice from Uncle Bobby too, though, right? Was that?
well, the kind of advice Uncle Bobby had, you needed to take out of the 20 words that he would say, you could use 2 or 3 of them. Okay, because most of it was well, I can describe one day we were at Tamiami Park. I think I was in the Domino's pizza car. We had qualified like 18th or 20th, something like that. And Uncle Bobby's doing the telecast in the booth and so on. And so we were on the grid, and he just happened to come down there before the race, and he said, "Come here." So I walk up, and he goes, "You know, you just need to look at today's race as just a learning experience. There's no way you're going to win this race today." And so the championship, because it's the final race of the championship, we really weren't going to gain or lose any spots for points or anything like that. And so, you know, he goes, just you know, learn as much as you can, because you're not going to win. I won that race that day. And so Uncle Bobby, and it would be the way he'd tell you, "Now I'm telling you, there's just no way you're going to win this race today." Okay, Uncle Bobby.
You can hear him. Now, moving into Formula Vs, this is your first chance to get into a rear engine car. What was that transition like coming out of karts and sprint cars?
It was pretty simple, actually. It was my first Super V race was at Michigan, and so the cars were easily just wide open all the way around, and really we were just in a pack of like 6 cars all bunched together, all running wide open and drafting and that sort of thing. I think I ended up 4th in that first race, and really the Super V, and then the second race, the Super V, was at Phoenix, Arizona, and we set it on the pole and won the race. Okay, and so I owe that all to the car owner. His name was Dave Pisaki, and he was running Jose Lee Garza, and it was Jose Lee's money that was doing the whole thing, and so it was really Jose Lee who helped me get in that car those 2 races, and so. As a matter of fact, the first race at Michigan was I think it was more of Dave Pisaki trying to lure me or my dad into it. And so I remember him calling up and saying, you know, we can run him at Phoenix, but it's going to cost X amount of dollars. And my dad goes, I'm not paying any money for my kid to run, you know, kind of thing. And so they worked it out. Jose Lee said it was fine. And so we went and we were testing there, actually. And I was trying to get turn 1 flat. It was right there. And so the 1 lap I decided this is it. I'm going to run it wide open all the way. And I committed. And right when I got about right in the middle of the corner, the right front blew. And I just went straight up into the guardrail. It was guardrail at that time. It wasn't a wall. It was guardrail. And as a matter of fact, I didn't left foot brake at that time. I was just right foot braking. And I tried to get my foot over on the brake so fast that I got it caught on the backside of the brake pedal. And so the car was like about half throttle when it went up and hit the fence. I opened my eyes, and the guardrail is right at my shoulder. I don't know how I didn't lose my arm, I tell you. And the car's still going. It's half throttle, so I'm up against the wall, and it's still grinding away. And so I finally got my foot out of there and totaled the car, absolutely totaled it. And they had a spare car in the trailer, and Jose Lee goes, he can have it. Let him run it. And so we came back and had success.
And in the small
And that
world.
was the last time I ever won at Phoenix, Arizona. I spent my whole career there and on the oval, and the best I could do was second. I ran second like 5 times or something.
No shame in that, right, Scott? Yeah. Now,
That was
ironically,
to help Scotty out.
Ironically, it was your Uncle Bobby that was Jose Lee's driver coach when he came to Indianapolis.
He
for
was his
rookie
team
year.
manager.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jose Lee ended up deciding to go all the way and own an Indy car. And Uncle Bobby ran it out of his shop there in Albuquerque. And Uncle Bobby even built the engines, okay?
Oh, man.
And he had a dyno, and he's running this dyno at midnight, okay? And Dad was very unhappy with Uncle Bobby about that because they lived right across the street from each other. and that dyno was going at midnight and stuff. My dad was not happy with Uncle. So.
Now, we've moved from Super V after winning that championship into doing the Can-Am Series. What was the story behind that?
The story behind that, it was Rick Gallis who owned the Super V, and so he decided he wanted to go racing, and so he owned the team. He had a 2-car team. I had different teammates. I had Bob Earl at one point as a teammate. I had my cousin Bobby Jr. as a teammate at one point, and so we went and won the championship. It was, as a matter of fact, I had become the first SCCA pro driver rookie to win the championship. And so we went into, the reason why we went into Can-Am, I was old enough to compete in kart, but I wasn't old enough to be in the Indy 500. So I was 19 when we ran the Super V, and then I was 20 when we ran the Can-Am, and so I could have run in kart. Rick Gallis wanted to get into IndyCar. That was his dream, was to come and race in Indy cars, and so he was gearing up to run IndyCar season from Super V straight into Indy cars. And my dad stepped up and goes, you know, your team, it needs more time, you know, which doing pit stops and stuff like that, and not just me as a driver, but the crew and the team and all that. And he goes, why don't you go, you know, Can-Am racing, and then Al, and then start your IndyCar team, and then Al can run in the Indy 500 with you, you know, because he'll be 21 at that point. And so that was the decision. It was really Dad who stepped in and said, you know, spend more time on your team, get it more prepared to run IndyCar.
And I believe
So
you
that's what
guys,
we did.
your first IndyCar start was at Riverside, correct?
It was at Riverside, yep.
In
yep,
82.
Yep, in 82, yep.
And you were running a Dan Gurney Eagle at the time.
Okay, no. The Riverside race was right before the final race at Laguna Seca in the Can-Am. And I'm trying to remember the car owner of that. I can't remember. It'll come to me later on, but it was a March.
Yeah.
It was an 82 March. And so we qualified, I believe, 10th and ended up running 5th in the race. And so it was a bittersweet kind of day, you know, because I had grown up racing, and I had Foyt and Mario and Dad and Uncle Bobby and Gordon Johncock and Johnny Rutherford. All these guys were idols of mine, and so they were gods, you know. And so my very first race, I out-qualified Foyt. I outran most of Gordon Johncock and Rutherford, and I ended up going up and passing my dad before halfway. That lasted for about 2 laps, and he passed me right back. But after the race, you know, we finished 5th, and I went, wow, you know, all of a sudden these idols of mine, they became men just like me, and so it was great that I could go out and do it and compete with them. But at the same time, you know, it was that idol thing that just fell away.
As you say, bittersweet, because, you know, given this is the way that you raced the remainder of your career, is you weren't intimidated by running up against a Mario Andretti at all. You write about it in the book as admiring these guys like your dad, but all the guys you raced with, but still realizing they're vulnerable. You can outrace them given the right day and circumstances. So you come to Indy in 83, that's your first season. Rick Gallis, who had been a key player in your career at that point, had, as I understand it correctly, had gotten an 82 Eagle, but the rules had changed. It didn't make the car competitive. So you had that brand new white and silver Coors Silver Bullet car for Indianapolis. Had a terrific race. So tell me about what went on in that race that caused the television controversy during the course of the race.
I wanted to help Dad win the race.
But you weren't blocking.
It was that simple. No, I was not blocking, but it appeared like I was. That's funny, you know. I mean, that's so funny. But it was, yeah. I mean, I was at the end of the race. During that race, um, first off, when I pulled away from the on the front straightaway, when I first pulled away, we have the steering wheel is on splines, and as soon as I pulled away, the steering wheel cocked to the left, and so it was that way. It wasn't straight. So what they did was the crew missed the spline on the steering wheel and put it on there wrong. Okay, and so I had to readjust my hands and so on. I should have just stopped, pulled up inside or outside, and just stopped and then reset it and then took off again. But it's my first Indy 500. I'm not going to stop once I get rolling. I'm not going to stop, and so really extremely nervous about the whole thing. And then during the race, we were competitive, but we were running good, and then I had a leak in the right rear tire that started going down. We don't have sensors or anything like that, and so I went into 3 one time, and it just went dead loose on me, and so on, and so that really, it just scared the you-know-what out of me, and so I came in, because definitely something wrong with the car. I came in, and they changed tires and all that, and they told me that it was a leak in the tire and so on. But it took me a long time to get the confidence back in myself to run the car at speed, you know. And so I was a good probably 10 mile an hour off the pace, and I went laps down just right there. And so at the end of the race, I got my confidence back up. Everything's good. I'd been running speeds that were competitive with everybody there, and so I found myself on a yellow. We were on a yellow, and I found myself third in line with Dad leading, Tom Sneva second, and I was third in line about like 8 or 9 laps down, okay? So I was in 10th place. I was third in line, but I was 10th place. And so I just decided, you know, if I could just jump Tom on this restart, then I could get between them, and then I could give Sneva, you know, a hard time passing me, you know. And so I got on the gas, and lo and behold, Dad was asleep on that restart. So I ended up passing him too, going into turn 4. I come off of turn 4, and all I can see is all yellow lights, you know, because they haven't thrown the green yet, you know. And I didn't even think about that. I was just trying to think about helping Dad win the race. So I come on that front straightaway, you got all the yellow lights. I'm like, okay, well then that's not going to be a restart. And then they turned green, and they went green. And so, okay, so I think I even kind of backed off a little bit and let Dad go by me. And so now I'm in the rocking chair, basically. Yeah. That's where I'm at. I'm right where I want to be. And so we're running a couple laps there, and I realized, Dad, I was hoping he would just check out because he had been fast all day long. And so I could do a little bit of lifting and so on and just stay in front of Tom by taking the air off of his car in the corners, and you know, you lose the front end really bad in those days. It was really bad, and so, but Dad didn't go anywhere, and so now I'm running behind Dad, and I'm going, well, I don't want to pass him, I don't want to get in front of him, but I want to try to help him win this race. And so what I did was, instead of giving Tom 2 cars to draft off of, I would get out of line, and then I could run it flat down the straightaways. I'd come off the corner, and I'd just step out from behind Dad, and then we could just run wide open. But it appeared on the TV that I'm blocking, and which, you know, I wanted Dad to win the race, but I truly wasn't blocking, because if Tom would have gone to the outside of me, I would have given him the outside. But, you know,
His choice.
Dad wouldn't go anywhere. So Tom was seeing an Unser traffic jam, is all he could see. And as a matter of fact, off of turn 4 after, because he was starting to get real frustrated with what was going on, and he almost hit the fence because I was watching him. If he ran low, I ran low. And if he kind of ran on the track, I was trying to stay in front of his car in the corners, and he almost pushed up into the fence off of turn 4. I mean, he missed that wall by just nothing. And it almost worked. You know, if Tom would have clipped the wall, then Dad would have went on to win. But he didn't. And so finally we came on some lap traffic, and that broke the whole scenario up. And Tom gets by me, and then he gets by Dad just right the next straightaway, and then he was gone. And then Dad's running so slow, so I ended up passing him. Because now Tom's leading, so might as well pass him. So I pass him. And then...
Did Sneva give you any heat after the race?
No, Tom didn't give me any heat. Tom Benford gave me some heat. Okay, he was the chief steward, and he called me into his office, and Dad went with me. And he goes, you know, you jumped that restart, so we're going to penalize you a lap or something like that. And it didn't change. The penalty they gave me did not change my finishing position, but it's still a penalty. And Dad was in there going, that's not right. He was all upset. Dad goes, that's wrong because I missed a shift and this and that. And then he ended up passing me. So, what was the... But Tom still gave me the penalty. So.
Yeah. Now, you can't have an Unser without at least addressing Pikes Peak. And Mario gave you some advice after you won your first and only Pikes Peak. What did he have to say about that?
He actually gave me that advice before I went to Pikes Peak, okay? So I went to Pikes Peak 3 times. The first time I went there, I was 16 years old, and I had no business being there. Plain and simple, but it was in Dad's car and that sort of thing. It was a Nance aluminum framed spring sprint car, basically, what it was, and it had a 2-speed gearbox in it, handbrake, that sort of stuff, and so we were super uncompetitive. I mean, I had no business being there, okay, and so thank God. The car broke a drive shaft because the engine was loading up so bad, and Dad was just saying, just slip the clutch, just keep it and come off the corner and pop the clutch and, clean it out and so on. And so I was doing that during qualifying, and it broke the drive shaft, okay? So I didn't qualify. And so then at Pikes Peak, there are no promoters options, okay, like in Annapolis, okay? And so we were in there fighting. Dad was fighting, and I was sitting there praying that, no, he didn't qualify. We don't have any promoters options. We're not going to let him race. That's what I was praying for. And Dad was going, let him race, let him race. And so they finally said, no, we're not going to let him race, okay? So I went, shoo, that was good. That was good. And so the next time I came to Pikes Peak, I was 20. And I drove Uncle Bobby's upright car, front engine, and it was a much better car. I was more mature. I could memorize the road at that time. When I was 16, I had no clue. Even though I went up there and drove up and down it all this time, I never knew where I was on the road. I didn't have it memorized, and so when I went back when I was 20, I had it memorized, all that kind of stuff. But we took a car up there that was outdated. It was the front engine sprint car type thing, and at that time, the competitive car was called a Coyote, and it was a mid-engine dune buggy looking thing, and so V8 power, strong power, but we just didn't have the car, and so on, and so I finished 3rd. I got Rookie of the Year, that sort of thing, and so. Then the next year, when I was 21, we actually raced the Cleveland Grand Prix, and that was a tough show. It was 500 kilometers. It took like 3.5 hours to finish that race. It was 90 degrees with 90% humidity. All the drivers were driving with their visors open. It was hot, okay? And so got on a plane, went to Pikes Peak, was up on the mountain at 6 a.m. on that Monday with that car. And it was actually during that weekend that I talked with Mario, and Mario goes, you know, that's one place you want to go, you want to win, and you never want to go back because it's too dangerous. That track is too dangerous. And so, well, I said, I hope I get to do this time, and so on, and we did. I was a teammate with Bobby Jr. On his team, and so we went, and I didn't set a record in qualifying, but I set it on the pole, and then went up, set a race record, and won the race, and then never went back.
Now you had, seeing as this is a Porsche crowd, the great good fortune to have known and worked with Al Holbert, who finished second to you in the Can-Am Championship. Al had reached out to you about running the Rolex 24 at Daytona. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, he called me up. It was the winter of January of '85, and he had been racing Indy cars in '84, and in the '84 race at the Indy 500, there was really only three of us that were racing. It was Rick Mears, Sneva, and myself, and we had the rest of the field a lap down by probably half distance. And so I was trying to work my way up to Mears. I had passed Tom and was working my way up to Mears, and then the car broke. And the one thing when Al called me in January of '85, he goes, you know, there was just nobody was passing me as much as you three out there, and so I would love for you to come and be the third driver in our car, because you definitely take care of equipment and you use your head out there, and that's what we want. I don't want somebody to go out there and try to prove that they're the fastest driver of the three and that sort of thing. I just need you to come in and just take care of the car.
Consistent
The
lap
equipment.
times.
Yep,
yeah.
yep, consistent.
So your
always
third
consistent.
driver was Derek Bell, right?
Derek Bell was the number one driver, and then you had Al Holbert, and then you had me. And so Derek qualified it. He's got a long history with Porsche, as you guys know, I'm sure, and so he was a great teammate. Yep, both of them were. It was a great effort. I committed to doing that, and then it was funny because about a week to 10 days later, AJ Foyt calls me on the phone, and he said, I'd like you to be my third driver at the Daytona 24. And I go, you know, I'm already committed to Al Holbert, but would you be interested in Dad? And AJ goes, well, yeah, I guess, you know. I mean, I hadn't really thought of that, but yeah. And so I go, well, let me call him and see if you know, he wants to do it, and I'll guys up if he does. And so I called him, and he goes, oh, Al, that race is so grueling. It's so much work, on and on. I don't know, you know, kind of thing. And he asked me, he goes, well, how much is Holbert paying you? And I told him, and he goes, yeah, okay, yeah. You know, well, yeah, okay. And so I go, okay, well, I'll call AJ and I'll back. And so I hooked him up, right? And so we get there, we're racing in the 24. It really, the two top teams was Holbert's team and Foyt's team. And so we definitely had the field covered. Our car was lightning quick. The race was just past halfway. Well, a little bit more than that. It was like about 3 or 4 a.m. on the second day, and we had a 45-minute lead is what we had on Dad and Foyt. And so that was, everything was good. Right then we started having problems. And so we were stopping out on the track, all that kind of stuff. So by noon, which with 45 minutes left in the race, Dad and Foyt's team passed us for the lead, is what it all came down to. And so Dad wins the 24 hours at Daytona, and I didn't.
But you would go on to win it twice.
Yeah, well, so that was 85, and so, you know, I did some more races for him. I did Sebring for 85, 86, and 87 were all with Holbert, and I really enjoyed driving for him and driving for that team. We did get the 24-hour done in 86 and 87. We went to Sebring, 12 hours of Sebring, all 3 of those years, leading it, going away, and something would happen. So we never won the 12 hours of Sebring.
But you never let grass grow under your feet, because about the same time you're competing in IROC, and this is during the Camaro era, and this is also this insertion of you learning to draft with a lot of the NASCAR guys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that was truly the main difference between Indy cars and stock cars is the drafts is just so huge, and so being able to learn that with the good old boys of the South, and so all the legends, you know, Dale Sr., Kel Yarborough, Bobby Allison, I mean all of them, and so to be able to race against them and so on and learn and try to learn, and it took me a few races to kind of learn what was going on, and you definitely had to make friends. That was the main thing. So my first Daytona race, I went straight to Dale Sr., who was standing in the garage area, and it was funny because I'm standing next to him and I'm kind of like kicking the ground kind of thing, you know, hi kind of thing, and so I noticed he was watching the cars come off the track and go into the garages and so on, and I go, what are you looking for, you know? And he goes, I'm trying to see their ride heights, where their ride heights are, and I go, oh, cool, okay, and can I help, kind of thing, you know? And he goes, sure, look for this on the cars, and I went, great, okay. So made friends with him straight away, and we would go on in the next years of IROC. Just it was either Dale or myself would be running up front, especially at Michigan, and so all the way up until Mark Martin showed up, and when Mark Martin showed up, he just killed everybody in the IROC series. So.
Now, fast forwarding a few years, to come to the pivotal race, you were desperate to win the 500. This is a big part of your career plan. 1989, you're in the closing laps with Emerson, and Emerson had been leading. You were able to make a pass as you guys got into traffic and were well ahead, but you were encountering more slower traffic. What happened?
Well, during that race, we were definitely prepared the best that I had ever been, and the car was fast and all that, and I didn't use it at all during the race. I didn't show any of it until near the end, okay? And as a matter of fact, we were under yellow. I had made my final stop. Emerson had not made his final stop yet, and I had made mine, and so I had the boost turned down and all that to get good fuel mileage, and all I needed to do is stay about 20 seconds behind him, not threaten him at all to make him go quicker, and then he would, if the race would go green from that point on, then he would pull in the pits, do his splash and go, and I'd win uncontested. You know, it would have been a great race. However, yellow flag comes out right when he's on the north chute, and so he's able to dive in the pits. They didn't close them in those days. He was able to dive in the pits and come out like about 2 cars in front of me on that yellow. And so I went, okay, well, now we got to go race him, you know, and so the green fell, and you know, we put the boost to it and all that kind of stuff, because with that yellow gave us enough fuel economy to be good to go the rest of the way. And we got through all the traffic and so on, and I actually passed him. He was clean. It wasn't traffic that I was able to pass him. We had a fast car, and so I think he kind of panicked or went, oh shit, where'd he come from, kind of thing, because I hadn't shown any of it all day until the end there, and so then I'm leading, and we're pulling away from him. He can't catch us, and then we came on lap traffic, and that's when he got the run on me going down the backstretch, and we're going by these cars on the right. And I don't even think Emerson knows that there's cars on the right, okay, because he's just concentrating on me so much. And after thinking about it, honestly, I think he had the red haze, what we call the red haze, okay? I mean, he was going to do whatever it took to get in there, and so he did, and so we went into 3, and he was below the white line, which Tom Benford made a big deal in the drivers' meeting, no passing under the white line and that sort of thing. And we touched. I went to the fence, and he went on and to
That was
win. And
your first hit at Indianapolis too, right? Your first accident?
yeah, I was very fortunate in Indy, with all the tire testing and all that we did.
So it leads to the dramatic moment. TV specifically anticipated as you climbed out of the car.
Yep.
And you walked out to the edge of the track, and all the safety personnel are near you, aware that anything could happen, and the TV crew zooms out so they don't get a good look at Al's hands.
And from behind, too.
Yeah.
They weren't showing from the front. They were showing from behind.
So everybody anticipated that you were going to give Emo the number 1, but you did not. So this was a very quick thought process. What went into
Well,
that?
actually, I intended to give him when I walked out there. It was the safety crew when I got out of the car, and I took my helmet off and I start walking towards the track. Safety crew stood in front of me, a guy, and he goes, "Where are you going?" I go, "I'm going out there." And he goes, "What do you want to do? Flip him off?" And I went, "Yeah." Yeah. And so he stepped aside. He says, "Go right ahead." And I went, "Okay." and so I got out there, and it just felt like an eternity because it's under yellow.
Yeah.
And he's coming around to get the checkered, is what Emerson's coming around to get the checkered. And I'm standing there, and I'm just looking at all the people, in the grandstands and so on. And it just, I had a thought that came into my head, and that was, with all the people watching live and then watching TV, wow, I can't really do this. It was like a story that came. I remembered go-kart racing, and Dad and I were watching this race at the go-kart track, and this kid spins out and crashes and stands up and takes his helmet and throws it into the seat of the go-kart. And my dad looked at me and goes, "If I ever see you do that, you won't be driving anymore," kind of thing. And that hit me while I was standing there waiting. And I went, it's Emerson's, all these thoughts came to my head. Emerson's godfather to my second daughter, Shannon. And Emerson's the one who pulled Nicky Lauda out of the fire in F1. He saved his life. Emerson, as a human being, genuinely cares about you as a driver and other human beings. I mean, he's a wonderful man. And so this is Emerson, and he's coming around to get his first win. We were both trying. And it was a racing thing. We both wanted it. And so I clapped and gave him thumbs up and congratulated him,
Beyond Indiana, yes.
I mean, I don't know why. I honestly, maybe if it was Scotty. But no, honestly, if it was Michael, it would have been another. It would have been Michael Andretti, yeah.
Now, beyond Indianapolis, the one race, you were king of the beach. Long Beach, you won the race 4 straight times. Would have won it a 5th if your teammate had not taken you out. What was it about Long Beach that really appealed to Al Unser Jr.?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. There's racetracks that you go to in your career, and I'm sure Scott has some, that you go and whatever decisions you make, they're the right ones, and the car goes faster. And then during the race, like the ball bounces your way. You know, maybe a lap car you're coming on, and he takes himself out and doesn't take you out, and so on. And so there's racetracks that things just fall your way, and honestly, Long Beach was that track. You know, honestly, I wished it would have been a month later, because we race Long Beach every year in April, and usually went to Indy, and so I wished that it would have been a month later. Yeah, I'd have loved that kind of luck and so on at Indy. So
Well, you finished the 89 season. You move into the 1990 season in kart, and you are a kart champion. So this is propelling you forward into still anticipating getting your first Indianapolis win. So late in 91, your team owner, Rick Gallis, talks to you about the possibility of having your own car. What you had with the Eagle in 1983, and what everybody else couldn't get, you had. And so here comes Alan Mertens, who's working with the team, and between he and Rick Gallis come up with the Galmer. And Danny Sullivan is your teammate that year. So brand new package. What kind of challenges did you face in early 92 in getting that car ready to race?
quite a lot. Developing that car. That car actually started back in 1990, okay, with, it was actually in 1990, Maury Cranes of the Craco racing team joined forces with Rick. And so the shop, Maury moved his race team to Albuquerque and so on, and Barry Green was the manager of the team and so on. I mean, it really raised the level of our team, and so with Bobby being my teammate in 1990, you know, I was able to win my first championship and so on, and then you know, 91, Bobby's still helping us out and that sort of thing, and the team's getting better, and the car is being designed over in England and that sort of thing, and truly the reason why I like that is, you know, I wanted the unfair advantage. I wanted to have a car that no one else had, and if it worked, then it makes winning a lot easier, okay? But if it doesn't, it makes winning way more difficult, and so, but I wanted to take that chance always and have the car, and so there was a lot of development on it. I worked really well with Alan Mertens and so on, and so we did the best we could with that car. It was extremely strong. It was pretty heavy. It had quite a lot of drag to it, okay, and so which meant it had a lot of downforce to it. But it just happened to be that Lola came out, the 92 Lola, and I've kind of talked with Michael Andretti about that. That's his favorite year car, is the 92 Lola, because it handled really well and was extremely fast. So.
But I remember Scott Goodyear had problems with his 92 Lola as you were getting ready for the race. Scott, would you like to come up and you guys kind of hash over exactly what happened in that interesting, extremely cold day at Indianapolis? Yeah.
Come on up, Scotty.
It was an interesting day for those of you who weren't there. I remember going to the track that morning. It was about 40 degrees. The wind was blowing, and I could only anticipate how miserable these guys would have to be in the race cars that day. And I think Al mentions it in the book. Had it happened today, Firestone would not have let these guys race. They were on Goodyears at the time. It would have been too cold to warm the tires up properly. Track temperatures were too low. But talk a little bit about what was coming on, Scott, with your situation at the beginning of that month.
Well, I think you're right on.
Switch. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, absolutely right about tires, because now I think the rule is that between the ambient and the track temperature has to be 100, so there was no way between the two there was 100 degrees with that now. Yeah, it was interesting because For the first 2 years, I was with Doug Shearson's team, and then Doug got a little bit ill, had cancer and what have you, and then he sold the team, and I was with a different team, Bob Tezak and the group, Uno Racing in 91. At the end of the year, Bob ran into a little bit of difficulty with the government, and he was not going to have a team in 1992. And in the end result, I changed over to Derek Walker's team at the very last minute. The season had started, and we finally got our car for Indianapolis late and really hadn't run it on oval at all. And every time I'd go out there, we would not be able to get enough laps in because we kept blowing engines. We didn't know what was going on. We were actually having an oil starvation problem. And you understand when I say this because it wasn't showing up on the dials at that point in time. You could just feel it in your butt, and you go, I come in, I go, this thing's going to seize up because you can feel it right away. And they go, can't find anything, can't find anything. So you go back out there, and guess what? Okay, and I'm going, told you. We did that a couple of times until finally they come and go, we got a problem. So back in those days, you had 2 qualifying weekends, and if you qualified the first weekend and everybody was in and you practiced all week, if it rained the second weekend, the grid was full because they didn't open it up. You didn't get a guaranteed whatever at all. So we pulled the 1991 car out of the trailer and put it on the track. So I qualified the 91 car for 1992. And I don't know where I was on that, probably 23rd or 5th, I can't really recall, but made for a very long week because we didn't know if we were going to get the car fixed. Long story short, what we ended up finding after going through the whole car is they finally cut the oil tank apart, and the scavenging tube was too short, and it was sucking air. And every time I got through the turns, so we ended up losing engines. So they fixed all that. We went out, the car was working really well. Tim Wardrop was the engineer at that point in time. Everybody knows him as Doctor Who, and brilliant engineer. And we had a great race car. So the deal at that point in time with Derek starting a new team, he came to us and Mackenzie and just said, you know, I'd really like to have 2 cars in the show. We're going to put Scott into the 92 car no matter what. But if we put him in the 92 car and he qualifies, the 91 car you qualified is now out of the grid and no longer the race. So Mike Groff was around. They said, why don't we get Mike to qualify the 92 car? You guys will change cars, and you have to start in the back row. So that's exactly what you need to do. You're starting in the back row after Mike had qualified the car. That one that I qualified ended up not being fast enough anyways. Back to the pressure of those days back and then, you know, this now you qualify on the race weekend, and there's no 2 qualifying weekends, so you don't have to sweat that whole next week, you know. So it was interesting back then. That's how we started dead last in 1992. So yeah, I didn't expect anything out of the race that particular year. It was just, you know, in the garage in the morning with the drivers, after the drivers meeting, talking with Derek, he said, let's just get points. Let's get
Yeah, that's the
top
way
10.
I came out of my motorhome, and I went, oh my God. You know, this
Shivering.
just,
I remember that
yeah,
part.
Yeah.
just
Shivering.
about survival. It
Yeah.
was just, that was it, just survival and points.
And Al, I think you mentioned that you'd had the car set up because the Galmer had a lot of drag, hoping that the weather would be hot and greasy.
We were hoping, yeah, it was a hope, but no, it turned out not to be true.
So what did you both think when Roberto Guerrero spins out on the warm-up lap?
I actually saw it, and I told the crew there's one down. I mean, before the race even starts, and because this is all before monitors or the video screens or anything, so Rick thought that something went wrong with the car. He goes, say that again, say that. He goes, are you okay? And I go, yeah, it's Guerrero, just hit the fence. Oh, okay.
I had just, because I was in the back row, obviously, so I let everybody get in front of me, and I'm warming up the tires, and I slid. And so I get on the horn just before this all happened with Guerrero, and to Derek Walker, and I just go, man, is it very slippery out here. I'm trying to warm up the tires. I almost lost the car. I slid and what have you. Scotty, just take your time. We'll be fine. Half a lap later, this happens. And then Derek pushes his radio in pit lane and goes, God damn it, Scotty, I told you to take it easy. You thought it was me. Okay. I'm going,
Rick thought it was me too.
yeah, so I'm on that go, Derek, it's not me. And I just passed him because he was obviously in the wall. I just said, I just passed him. It's not me. And he goes, oh, okay, all right, back to the race. Okay, let's get ready for the start. You know, it's one of those deals.
Oh, and it was just, as I talked to Scott earlier tonight, there were 9 yellow flags in the first 100 laps. And everybody was being taken out, caught out, cold tires, whatever the situation was. But it was Michael Andretti's day. And I think everybody
for
was
sure.
watching him run away. You guys consistently stayed up. Scott's passing traffic. You're staying up there in a car that wasn't properly prepared, but was prepared with the right driver to make that gas. But what happens as you get up to, what was it, around lap 190 something, 180 something, and all of a sudden you hear Michael slowing down?
Well, Scott and I had been in a really good race like the last 50 laps. I mean, on different stops. And so we were so equal that it took lap traffic in order for one of us to pass each other. So if I was in front of him, we'd come up on lap traffic, he'd be able to get a run on me, and then when we'd get through the traffic and so on, then he's in front of me and we come up on lap traffic, then I was able to get the run on him. And I had just gotten the run on him, just so happens, and I just passed him.
I remember that.
And all of a sudden, there's a yellow, and it's Michael slowing. And had it been the other way, the whole thing would have been the other way.
I remember it was turn 2 in lap traffic, and I ended up going down a gear, that car was going so slow, and came out of 2, looked in the mirror, and I saw you coming, and you probably remember this distinctively. And big run coming like that, and the closing rate was incredible because I had to go down, the 4th gear. And so I saw you coming, moved to the right, and moved to the left, and then if I had known the outcome, what was going to happen there would have been a crash, okay?
That's right.
There would have been a big crash. So anyways, yeah, so you had sailed past, and then you are now in second, and then a couple of laps later, Michael's out, and that was, but Michael had us completely covered. And I said to Derek Walker on the radio when I was second, and I'm looking down there, and I'm doing 223, 224 average, and I'm going, Derek, where's Michael? I'm thinking, okay, this is going pretty good, right? And then he doesn't answer, and then I said to Derek again, Derek, where's Michael? How fast is he going? He goes, I'm checking. Another couple of laps go by, I ask him again, and he goes, don't worry about it, Scotty, you're doing fine, keep on going. Later, after the race, I found out he's at 227 and just leaving us behind, and Derek didn't want to pass it along to me. But I mean, that was Michael's day, quite frankly, and he had his so covered. And did he have the Ford? I can't remember, the Ford that year? I think he did he not? He had the Ford,
Cosworth,
and that was, I was happy because it was the first year, I did my first 2 years with the Judd engine, and then, so this was the first year with the Chevrolet engine and better fuel mileage, and you didn't have to baby the engine and all this sort of stuff. So, and then you start the season, you think this is going to be great, and then obviously, then you hear about the Cosworth, and okay, we've got.
They definitely had the power all season long. Over anybody else.
So is Scott still asking you for any part of the royalties for having
Every
made
time
such
I
a
see
dramatic
him.
finish? Yeah.
Every
How
time
much have I got? Right there, yeah. So.
Just make sure he buys a Waffle House. I think that'll help.
I kept telling him, loser pays, no matter what.
Yeah.
Still the closest finish in the history of the Indianapolis 500 and very difficult to beat. And those of us who survived in the cold that day, we felt sorry for Scott, but we knew it was a terrific finish.
Well, actually, like I said earlier on, just at the very beginning, the stuff that comes in the mail today is still wrapped around 1992. And it means so much to so many people. I was doing an event at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum 10 days ago or something like that when I text you, and this guy comes up and he's got a program, and Al's already signed it. And and I sent you that picture of me standing with this guy. And so the guy says, I wanted you to sign it, but you have to sign it second because you finished second. I know that, okay? I know that. You don't need to tell me that. So...
Honestly, it's for me, I think it's just quite amazing that it's still this long, when really the closest one prior to that was Gordon Johncock and Rick Mears.
Yeah. Right.
And the one before that, it was like they're not even on the same lap or the same straightaway or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so then, it was astonishing for Rick Mears and Gordon Johncock to be that close.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it wasn't, that was just 10 years later?
Yeah, and especially in those conditions. I mean, because, you know, in the cars, I mean, because you described it before too. I mean, I can remember going for the green flag and coming through the turn in turn 4, and the car was sliding. It was sliding across the road, and you're not take your foot off the gas, but the wall's coming up, and you're sort of pedaling this thing, and then it would just go to catch, and then you're okay. I'm going. I mean, it was like this every time
It
on
took
a restart.
2 to 3 laps to really get some heat in
and
the
then
tires.
and if you felt like you could maybe get somebody on a restart, you'd take a shot at it, and then they'd take your air away, and you were done. It was awful as far as that was concerned.
Well, thank God Michael broke, because that race still would have happened, but it would have been for second.
yeah, that's true.
We would have still drove that hard.
Yeah.
Having heard you guys talk about this before, and I hadn't really considered this, when you're under yellow, did all the perspiration and everything in that cold air, did that make it miserable in the car?
Freezing cold, yeah.
The cars weren't sealed back then, not like they are today. I mean, the air was coming through the car, so you know, today they're so sealed, obviously, that you don't get any of that airflow. So, because back then you used to get stuff coming up in your eyes, and you remember that? It was just terrible.
Well, I purposely had a small aqueduct on the front to equalize the pressure from the outside air to what the cockpit is. And so when we actually did that, you know how your head would shake, the air buffeting, and sometimes it would actually pull the helmet up.
Right.
Put that aqueduct up there, and it just smoothed it out, just like it wasn't there.
Now you tell him.
Yeah. And he said, you know, the car had a lot of drag, and I'm thinking, well, it wasn't draggy enough because I couldn't get by, right? So, you know, but as I've said many times when I've done these things, you know, between the close races, you know, 92, I didn't have the knowledge, the experience to be able to race and be able to pass you, because I go back and look at it. We had the apron back then, so you had a lot of racetrack to use, and I didn't know where to position the car, because I was, you know, I go back and watch it, and then I'd get a run on it and think, I'm doing good, and then I'd be pushing up to the wall, and, you know, then you're like this, but you're still not taking your foot off the gas, right? I mean, I don't think I lifted for whatever the many laps that was.
Yeah, no, I ran wide open all the
it
way
was
to turn 4
Yeah,
on the checker.
but you didn't lift enough because I wasn't quite by at that point in time. Yeah, no,
I
it
thought
was
for sure I lifted too much.
no, it was like you were getting a cramp in your leg because you're pushing that pedal as hard as you could possibly push that thing, and the speeds were just, it was a lot of fun. But yeah, the coldness there was incredible. But yeah, I'm not sure that I had the knowledge at that point in time, because I didn't do oval racing. I was in Europe and Canada. I was doing stuff throughout on road courses. So probably my 14th, 15th oval race, I think, in my life. And I learned a lot because I went back and watched it. And then I think it probably took another year or two until you really felt like you had a good handle on oval racing. Because, I mean, stagger and all that sort of stuff, I mean, there's just so many tricks to all that sort of stuff, which, you know, he wasn't going to share with me at all. So.
No, I was actually watching you really close, those laps, and because I honestly, it took me back to my rookie year in '83. I wanted to take away as much air from you in the corners, and then give you as much air as I could down the straightaways. So that's to start weaving down the straightaways to block the draft. And then I was watching that I was going through the corners, and I was something I learned from NASCAR, from IROC racing, where you got to have one eye on the mirror and one eye going forward. You got to always be watching these guys, and so I would watch you, and if you were going low beneath me, like real low on the apron, the next corner I'd go real low on the apron, and then I started to it felt like I started to pull you a little bit by giving you, really watching you, staying in front of you in the corners.
Yeah.
Were you guys getting help from the spotters in those days?
No spotters.
There's
No
no
spotters.
spotters. No,
No spotters.
no spotters.
And tiny mirrors.
He was my spotter.
Yeah, there is no spotters. You know, and it's interesting, because that's the thing that's, I think, changed racing a little bit today. And I think spotters came into IndyCar racing through the IRL, almost like the stock car stuff, because you had to have spotters up there. And then, you know, and I don't know about you, but I wasn't so fond of people in your ear all the time, you know, because it just wasn't right with me. So I had a couple of spotters, and then We got rid of a couple of them because they just talked too much. And the best spotter I actually had, Doug Bowles, was my spotter. And he stood up there. He was just perfect for it, you know, because it really worked out really well. That was back in the Panther days. And but you know, when you talk about no spotters, remember we used to go to Michigan, the speeds that we had there.
Oh, yeah.
And if you passed people, you know, you gave them respect, you gave them room. You wouldn't do the things that they're doing today because the spotters are up there. It doesn't matter if it's Texas or what have you. You know, and you get clear, and then you move up and you take the guy's air away.
Well,
I mean,
isn't it the mile and a half that brought in the spotters?
it was.
In the IRL.
Yep.
That's where
Yep.
the spotters originated from, in single seat
Yep.
open wheel
Yep.
racing. Yeah.
And you really needed them there because they were running so close,
Absolutely, you
especially the
did.
early days when we started going to Texas, when I first transferred over to the IRL. You know, and it was just like, I mean, you were on edge because the guy's wheel is right there and you're 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. And I remember the first Texas race that I did, and I was 4th, so I'm on the outside, and, you know, as they tell you, okay, you're pitting in 10 for fuel, right? Pitting in 10, okay. Pitting in 5, pitting in 4, and then you started pitting in 3, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm on the outside. How do I get on the inside? You know, I go, that was the first thing. I went doing and go, man, we got a problem here. And then it was Sharp that was beside me. He peeled, and then I turned around and got in there, and I got in there. So at that point in time for the next fuel runs, I'd be on the outside a little bit like that. But when I got close to being fuel time, I'm over there on the left-hand side from that point on. But you were nose to tail, and you rubbed wheels. I mean, back then it was, I mean, you did it for all those years too. It was, you look back
That's
on it
why
now,
I
it's a
quit,
sand-
okay? Because rubbing those wheels on the mile and a halves.
Yeah,
I mean,
I stopped before
running-
you though. You continued on for a couple of years.
Yeah, but that is what
Yeah.
put me in retirement. I could keep track of 6 cars in a draft, okay? Mentally, I could, you know, watch and so on, and then, but then when Penske came and Ganassi came full-time, that 6 turned into 12.
Yeah.
And that I couldn't keep track of anymore. And I'm racing, excuse me, with Marco Andretti beside me, and some other young guys all around me, and I'm going, you know, these guys, they haven't even been in the hospital.
Yeah.
They have no sheet time. They don't know what pain is, you know, and I'm in the middle of all this, and I do.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it was time.
It's funny you say that because I always tell the story a lot of times that the first time I broke my back, which was in Brazil, in Rio, when we had a rear wing failure, and doing like whatever it was, 208 going forward, then you're going 208 going backwards. And I went around so quickly, and I'm going, this is not going to end well, and it didn't, obviously. So on that particular accident, that's because our safety team travels with us, if you can remember. I'm there, and I can't even breathe, and I've broken my back in 3 places. I can't feel from the waist down. The first guy that was at the car was Terry Trammell. And the Horton safety truck at that time had not even stopped moving. The door's open because Terry watched the accident, and his feet are on the ground going, the truck's not stopped yet. He just comes and slides up the car. He's just far away from me, and he goes, you all right? And I go, Terry, I can't feel from my waist down. And he knew, because he saw the crash. And then he made whatever motion it was, and then all of a sudden there's guys on top of the car, the neck braces going on the backboard and all this sort of stuff, and out of the thing, and then helicoptered out of there to the hospital. And then he made a back brace, you know, he measures you and then makes a clamshell basically, and got it shipped from Miami at that point in time. So I was down there for a couple of days, and then puts a clamshell on you and then ships you home, and you come to Methodist with Terry and what have you. So that was accident number 1. So, but my point about that is that after accident number 1, I'm telling him, and that's back in March that year, I need to go to Indy. I need to go to Indy. Just stay with me. I'm not really too sure. I'm not too sure. I went in there to see him one time in his office, and he goes, I'm not really too sure. And I go, I'm still in my clamshell. I'm going, well, I'm going to Indy. I'm going to race at Indy. And then I was also with a Porsche factory that year for Le Mans. And I said, and then I'm going to Le Mans. And he goes, you are? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, when are you going to get your license? I said, well, I've got a license. Oh. And what about your insurance? I said, well, I got insurance. John Gore's line, right? I said, I've got my insurance. He goes, oh. He just looks at me and he goes, do you know I need to sign off on both of those? Terry, how are you? What can I do for you? It was one of those deals. It was one of those deals. Yeah. I didn't get into, he didn't sign off on that. He said, you're not ready to hit a wall. But Le Mans was 4 weeks later. But where I'm going with this, that the next time and whatever, I was in my 20s or something like that, next time was, I had already retired at Texas Motor Speedway, came back to do the Infinity program in 2001 with Eddie Cheever's team, and got crashed out in another crash and breaking my back in 3 spots and what have you. Now I'm down there at Methodist, and Terry walks in and we're having that conversation. He goes, and I know you're probably going to be in a rush to go get back in the car. I go, I'm in no rush. Why don't you take your time and tell me whatever you need? So it was a back brace for 4 months at that point in time. But to your point, when you're young, you don't care. You're going to go bounce off stuff.
Right.
And when you're a little older, you're a little smarter. And it's, I watch what's going on there today. I mean, even the Texas and stuff like that. I mean,
It's crazy.
it's crazy. And if you just need to go hit the walls a few times, and that's they need to crash. And it's almost, that's where I live right now with our F4 that you were running your team for a couple of years, and then the F3 and FR that we have. The kids, you can explain it to them, but it's almost, they hate to say it, they need to go out there and experience something that's going to take a scare out of them. That's the only way to make them have respect.
Cars are extremely safe today.
Yeah.
I mean, extremely safe. So that gives a lot of it. These things go upside down, and to me, it just scares me to death. But they walk away from it. So.
I mean, the head surrounds are so much better with
Absolutely.
Jeff Horton was the guy that started all that whole programming, and with IndyCar for so many years, and came along with the safety, working with Terry Trammell and group, and obviously they've got the windscreen now. I mean, there's so much safe. The head and neck restraint. I mean, what a brilliant idea. And
And Al was driving through that era too in the mid 80s where you guys were sitting so far forward, your feet were in front of the front axle. So given the circumstances, Rick Mears, Foyt, all of these guys wound up with the shuffle.
I broke my ankle in '85 at Road America with being, the cars were extremely weak on the front. That was just built out of aluminum honeycomb, and you were way far forward, and
I want to talk about one key element, your second Indy 500 win. You've gotten the call earlier to be hired by Roger Penske, the call any race driver wants. So Roger
I was really lucky.
Yes.
Yep.
And Roger lets you know he's working on a special project. And in those days, the amount of boost you would get was determined by the type of engine you had. If it was a pushrod engine, then you would get a little bit more power. And so Roger decided to come up with a new program. Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, actually, with Roger, when I got the call, I was in my motorhome and I needed to stop at a rest area because cell phones weren't that good back then, and so I wanted a line phone because it's time to call Roger. I call Roger and he goes, I'm interested in hiring you, and I go, great. And he goes, are you talking to anybody right now? And I said, yes, I was, which was Newman Haas. I was talking to Carl Haas, and we had been in negotiations for a good 6 to 8 weeks. And I go, yeah, I'm talking to him. He goes, how much are you talking? And I told him, and he goes, well, we don't pay that here, kind of thing. And he goes, all my drivers get paid the same. This is the number. And it was like more than half less than what I had been talking with Carl about. So, I mean, Roger cut my paycheck in half right there. And he goes, are you still interested? I said, yes, sir.
This is with Mo and Paul Tracy. So.
Yeah, I said, yes, sir. He goes, well, if that sounds good to you, let's meet at Mid-Ohio, da-da-da. And I go, okay. So we make our deal. It all comes to fruition. And so we're at a charity baseball game, okay? And I've signed with Roger and all that kind of stuff. It's all on the down low. I'm not supposed to tell anybody. He's not telling anybody, all that kind of stuff. And so we're in this dugout, and you've got most of the drivers in the dugout, and we're leaning on the fence watching the game, and we're standing next to each other. He goes, Al, we got an engine coming, like that. And I go, great, great. You know, this is the reason why I gave up the big numbers is to drive for Roger. And so he goes, yeah, it's a push rod engine, it's a V8, and it just rang a bell because he just reminded me of a conversation I had with Tony George about 5 years earlier. Tony told me that there's an engine in the rule book that if somebody would build it, it would outrun everything out there, and it's the V8 push rod engine with the amount of boost that they're giving it. And I went, oh, this is a dream come true, you know, and he said, yeah, this is good, you can't tell anybody, kind of thing. And of course, Roger, of course, so.
But you kept the secret really well. I mean, by the time you guys got to Indianapolis, I know Paul Tracy had done a lot of the testing, but
Yeah,
what was your first reaction in the car?
Had social media been around
Yeah.
those days, it would have never happened. It would have never happened.
Well, most of it was in Nazareth, right? I mean, down
Just
the road.
one test. Well,
Okay,
actually,
down the road
two
from
tests.
Mario's house?
Yep, there was 2 tests at Nazareth, but it was way too cold. You know, the very first test, I drove the car, and they snow plowed the track off. There was 4 feet of snow on the ground, and that was actually the inside wall of the racetrack all the way around. Was a 4-foot snow. But yeah, after that first test, I told Roger, I go, you can't really open it up here. So, you know, it had a lot of power, yes, and so on, but you're lifting, you know, way too much at Nazareth where you don't lift at Indy. And so I told him, I go, let's take it to Indy. He goes, oh, we can't take it to Indy because, you know, we don't want anybody to know. And I go, well, then Michigan, you own Michigan, you know. He goes, oh, wow, there's so many people and stuff like that. I go, Roger, if we could make it live at Michigan, it's going to be a breeze at Indy because you lift more at Indy than you did at Michigan at that time. And so if we can make it live there, it'll go. And so we started testing it. After Tracy tested it, I think, in the snow again, and it was just, I think he honestly said the same thing that I did. You're lifting too much, you can't. And so that first test, I remember the first test, we took it to Michigan, and this thing had a lot of power. It had a lot of power where you'd go in and just kind of getting up to speed, where you'd lift a little bit and then put it back down before you come off of 2. It actually bust it loose a little bit off of turn 2, the torque, okay? But the engine would blow at 200 miles. And so when we brought it back the next time, it would go 250 miles, but it had a little less horsepower. And that was the way it was. Every time we brought it back, it had a little less horsepower.
But you had the field covered that day.
Still plenty of power.
Yeah, you put the car on the pole, and it had been Emo's race a good part of the day. And then Emo, as he's trying to put everybody down, yet another lap, and I believe you were just ahead of him at that point. He gets a little too aggressive coming out of 4.
Well, it was Chuck Sprague telling him that he needed to pass me. Chuck was the team manager, and so if he said, you got to pass him, because I had made my final stop, and Emerson hadn't. And so it was about a lap where coming in, and it ended up about a lap where Emerson, I don't think he realized that just staying behind me, he had me a lap down. You know, but Chuck was telling me, you got to pass him. And so that red haze I talked about earlier came over him, I feel again, and that's when he made his mistake in turn 4.
And you were working without radios most of that day too, right?
All day.
Pit board.
All day.
Old
It was
school.
all day pit board, and I just hadn't been used to Roger. You know, that was only our 4th race together. And so I didn't really think anything of it, but Roger talks every lap. On every time you go by, he gives you some kind of information, and I didn't even realize that he hadn't been talking to me until they finally put out a board about, I don't know, 7 or 8 laps into the race. As soon as we pulled away, no radios. and it said radio ? And so then I pushed the button, I'm talking to him or whatever, and nothing coming back after a couple laps. So we had a system, an open hand was yes, and a closed fist was no. Something that Dad taught me when I first started driving Indy cars, okay? And to communicate for the pits and so on. And he goes, and so that's one of, I would tell Doug Shearson that when I went to drive for him. I go, if the radios go down, just ask me a yes or no question, I can answer it, so on. And so I finally gave him the fist and no, and so then all of a sudden the questions really started, you know? And we were communicating so good that they started putting like long sentences, okay? I mean, where it was taking me like 3 laps just to read the whole thing, you know? And I'm going, wow, because it got that good. We were just communicating that good.
Now,
so.
I got to digress because at one point you tell a story in the book about how when you were running for Rick Gallis, you had lost the radio with the team, but all of a sudden Larry Newber comes on with ESPN.
Yeah, that was the
interviewing you in
Domino's car, actually. That was the Domino's Pizza
okay.
car, and it was at Pocono.
So you've got the only radio you have is with the media and not with your team. And tell us a little bit about what happened on that.
Well, first off, I had a broken ankle, okay? And I had to be carried into the car. It was the first race after Road America where I had broke my ankle. And so it's 2 weeks later that I'm back in the race car again. And so we were going around there, and it just, they'd asked me prior to the race with ESPN, they want to talk to a driver. This is the first time they've done that kind of thing. So it was all new. So they go, you know, under yellow, do you care if we talk to you? And I go, no, not at all, you know. And so we didn't have a yellow for like 120 laps, okay? So I'm going around there, and again, radio communication problems and so on. So we were doing the closed fist, open hand, all that kind of stuff. And so we have that yellow, that first yellow. We dive in, we make our pit stop, we go back out, and so, okay, everything's fine, you know, kind of thing. And all of a sudden, there's, hey, Al, this is Larry Newberg, and it came across me so loud, it scared me to death. I jumped, I went, whoa, where'd that come from? And so I pushed the button, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yes, yes. Get that radio down to my guys now. And they go, okay, you know. I go, okay, well, can you still talk to us? And I go, sure. So we talked to him, and it actually, I didn't know it, but I could hear Dennis's voice, so I thought they got a radio down to him. Well, they didn't use they did it on a TV interview with him, okay? So they didn't have no radio down to him. And so I thought they did, and so we go green, and we run a few laps, and I'm running second, and Rutherford's leading, and I watch him go into turns 1, and he bottomed the car out, and it took off, crashed. So we're under yellow again. I'm leading now because Rutherford crashed, and so I push the button. I go, Dennis, do you want me to pit? Because I had lost track of the laps from my last stop, you know. Do you want me to pit? Do you want me to pit? And silence. Crickets. Do you want me to pit? Do you want me to pit? Nothing. And so I go, okay, just for safety, I'm going to come down pit road. And we didn't have any speed limits at that time. However, Rick Mears is behind me in line, and so once I peel off, I'm coming down pit lane there, and they're waving me by, and I don't see this all happening until later, okay, once I get close to the pit and I'm about to slow down. Wave me by, so I stand on the gas, and I come out, and right at the blend line, Mears had just crossed it, and now I'm coming back out behind him. It starts to rain. It's misting. We're like 140 or 150 laps. We're well past half distance. And it's starting to rain and the mist on my shield. and I push that button and I go, Larry, can you hear me? Why, yes, Al. I pushed that button and I called him every name in the book. I didn't let go of that button for a full lap. I called him every name in the book. You rotten, rah, 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 rah. You just cost me this race, you know, kind of thing.
Meanwhile, on the satellite backhaul, Al's audio is playing to everybody who's got
He's got a satellite, the big satellites. The big satellites. Yeah, I actually heard about
Good
that.
thing no social media back then.
Yeah, hey. Well, yep.
Well, okay, you finished the 94 year with great success in the championship. 95, you come to Indy, and the Penske car isn't what you guys had hoped it would be, not what it was the year before. And that leads to the dramatic moment. I was in the media center at the time. Everybody's watching that you guys were struggling to find a car that would get you guys in the show, you and Emmo. What was that?
Yeah, it was just, you know, that thing I talked about earlier about the ball bouncing your way. In 95 at Indy, it was the exact opposite of that. That ball wasn't even on the court or anything like that. And it was just, no matter what we did, as a team, it was the wrong decision. Roger waving off Emerson's because it wasn't fast enough, but it would have been fast enough to make the show. And so Roger waves that off. I was qualifying second weekend in the Lola from Ray Hall's, and we're running fast enough. It was the first attempt. It was Saturday. I was the last car to go out. Perfect conditions. We're running well fast enough, and the engine blows on the third lap, you know. And so really, no matter what we did, when we first got the car and tested it, it was in March. It was at the end of March. And Emerson could not get the car over like 208, 209 was the fastest he got it in after 3 days of testing. Emerson got, and so Roger flew me in. I tested it the fourth day, and it had cooled down. It had been like in the mid 70s and sunny for Emerson's test. But when I came on that fourth day, we extended the test, and Roger flew me in. It went down into the mid 60s, but still sunshine and so on, great weather. And I got it up. That was when we were running the 227, 228, and I got it up to that speed before the end of the day. And we really thought we had fixed what was wrong with the car, and so on. But we came back in May, and now it's in the 80s. Anything above 75 degrees, that car just went to junk. It just went to junk, and so it made it for a very long month.
Well, and by missing that race, you also missed Scott Goodyear's problem with the pace car at the end of the race, giving the race to Villeneuve. But
Slow
What
pace
happened
car.
on that, by the way?
Did you have to ask?
put him on the spot.
Yep, slow-moving pace car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they lifted, huh?
I'm not really too
They
sure,
just
but
took
what
their
are we
time.
geared?
They
We're
just took
geared
their
for
time
what,
getting around
62
four.
miles an hour in first gear, whatever it is. I can't remember it, but yeah, I was almost clutching the car. They're supposed to be doing 80 and then obviously accelerating to 100. So he was long gone, but yeah, no, I was on the gas because I saw that and I thought he's got a problem, you know, because he's right down low. And so I just went around the outside and down we go. And a few laps later,
Weren't you out of four? I mean,
Wait.
well out of four.
oh, he was
right?
well, he was probably on the apron of four or down
Okay.
towards the center of four or center off towards the pit end. But yeah, when I gassed it in three, he was already long gone, but obviously not going fast enough. Yeah. Then the funny thing about that, I went around for a few laps and we're leading, and then Steve Horn. And Steve actually has a driver in our F3FR series now. That's out of New Zealand. And so Steve's coming here in the month of May,
Great,
actually. Yeah,
great.
Steve will be here next week in Elkhart Lake with our series, and he's coming to the 500. And Steve Horn owned the team, run the team for Honda. And then he gets on the radio and he goes, Scott, they're going to penalize you for passing the pace car. And I said, well, Steve, I don't know. Seemed like he was going slow. Okay, let me check on that. Comes back 2 laps later, and he said, they're going to black flag you. You need to come in. And I just waited for about a half lap. I pushed the button, and I said to Steve, Steve, I'm not coming in. And it's quiet for about another half a lap, and he radios back. He goes, okay, then, we'll see you at the end. And that's the way it was, because, all the junior racing you're doing that, and I had this in karting and what have you, that if they give you a black flag and it wasn't really you that did something, they're not going to take you from 7th or 14th and move you back to 1st, right? So I just stayed out there and went around there and thought, so like I always say, though, in the last lap, you want to do 5 left-hand turns, right? You want to do turn 4 is your 4th, you want to come down pit lane and then make the left. And then, I remember that first stop didn't get the checkered flag, which was the first indication. I thought, well, this is a problem. Okay, I'm not getting the checkered flag. And then you come down pit lane when you come in, and you know how they point you and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know, he was very eccentric voice to us. He just went like that, and he said, you keep going straight. So I thought, I want to go left here. He goes, I thought that was a problem. Yeah.
You do realize Uncle Bobby would have parked it in Victory Lane. That's why they were so adamant, because
yeah, probably so. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that was disbelief. But, it's interesting because for me, at that point in time, I think I sort of felt like I understood a little bit. I mean, you had that very early on probably, but it took me a little while before you really understood what the track needed, what the car needed, and how to approach the race. And I guess after 95, I thought, okay, I'm going to be coming here for a lot longer, so okay, we'll get this type thing. That was the sort of thought.
You guys were also on opposite sides for a good part of the split that happened in 1996, just based on opportunities and a ride. You're still driving for Roger. And ultimately, Scott, you're with John Barnes and all the guys who started Panther Racing and leading 2 different directions. What did the split wind up meaning to you, Al? Because it meant, obviously, you weren't going to be running Indianapolis in 96. Yes, it's a good question. Back in 1994, Tony George had felt that the series ought to be more oval-centric, and the championship auto racing teams, the group of owners that ran the rest of the series, all felt that we needed to continue to steer the course. There had been some effort to bring Tony onto the board to get him to understand what CART's issues were, and Tony tried to get CART to understand what the Speedway's issues were, in large part because there had been a fear by Tony that Carl Haas and a number of people had suggested they might not run Indianapolis if Indianapolis doesn't comply to what CART really wanted. And so as a result, the teams that were traditional CART teams, there was instituted what was known as the 25-8 rule. So 25 positions of the 33 at Indianapolis would be guaranteed to teams participating in the IRL, and 8 would be available to the fastest 8 qualifiers from any other series, but clearly CART. And the CART team owners understandably said, we're not going to play with those rules. So Indianapolis was run with those cars participating in the IRL, and the CART ownership decided we're going to run a competing race same day about the same time at Michigan called the US 500. So Al and most of the IndyCar drivers that everybody knew at that time were competing at Michigan, and were missing Indianapolis.
Yeah. So the split really started back in the late 70s, 77, 78, with USAC being the sanctioning body of IndyCar racing, and they started doing some things that the car owners didn't like, so the car owners got together and formed CART, and so championship auto racing teams. And so those were the car owners, and that series started either 78 or 79, right in that area. And so they would come back to Indianapolis, these IndyCar car owners would come back to Indianapolis and race under USAC, is the sanctioning body for the Indy 500, and then all the other races were CART. And so I remember those first couple of years, Dad was all in a panic because you didn't know if you were going to be, the teams were going to be invited, because there's a real split going on between USAC. Like AJ was taking Indy cars to Pocono and racing basically champ dirt cars to fill their field. That's what USAC was doing. Foyt never did go to CART. Foyt stayed with USAC the whole time and that kind of thing. And so that's when the split really happened. But they were making nice with each other, the championship auto racing teams and USAC being the sanctioning body for the next several years. And so that's what I did, was I raced in CART on the championship with Mid-Ohio, Road America, Long Beach, all that kind of stuff. But the Indy 500 was the only race where we went and raced under USAC and the sanctioning body. So that split finally came to a head when the car owners were really not respecting Tony in any way and that kind of thing. And so Tony, I think, was honestly afraid because of the USAC, the car owners were like Long Beach, had to pay a fee for IndyCar to come and race Long Beach, okay? And so Tony was afraid that the car owners could charge him a fee to bring CART, which was the current IndyCar drivers. So there was that one. And then they wanted to run road courses, and then, you know, Tony's an oval, and so it just had a melting point from the late 70s, and then it finally hit in 94 when he announces he's going to start the IRL.
I think there's television money there too. So remember that there was some television money. All the CART owners wanted a piece of the television money that Tony was getting for the Indy 500. That helped
there
to
was
divide.
a list of things that I think CART hadn't forced the issue, but could.
So as drivers, you're in the series right now, you're hearing all this and you're thinking, because you start talking about it in drivers' meetings and you start to hear all the stuff that go along with it. Dollenbach Sr. was running the chief steward at that point in time. So you were updated a little bit as you were going along, but I think there was a lot more happening behind the scenes that we ever heard about.
Right.
And then obviously, you probably had the same feeling once you heard that it's going to split. And I'm older than you. You had to make a decision. I mean, it was a point in life, and you were with a team that continued, obviously, on the CART side. I had to change from Derek Walker's team that was running CART, and Derek was a staunch CART guy.
Right.
And then I moved over to the IRL because I knew I only had probably another 3 or 4 years of actually driving Indy cars. I had already put in my mind I was only going to drive Indy cars until I was 40. And this happened when I was like 36 or something. So I wanted to make the changeover so I'd have another shot at the Indy 500. Even though there's only 6 races a year, I think it was at that point
And
in
Al,
time.
you were kind of caught in the middle because you and Tony George are good friends. So that friendship was challenged while you're still honoring your contract to race with Roger.
Well, Tony was doing everything he could to get me to come and run in the IRL and so on, and because we are good friends, and I felt he was right. I truly did that something needed to happen to make the series better, and so unfortunately, the way it all unfolded, it hurt the IndyCar series as a whole.
You could almost say back then that F1 was starting to get worried about IndyCar. Would you not agree
They
back
were.
in that point
That's
in time?
right.
Because we started going to Brazil, to Australia, and all this sort of stuff, and feeding out internationally. And so I think, I'd only been in the series for a few years at that point in time, but it really felt there was an opportunity for this to really grow internationally. And I think, that came to a screeching halt when this all happened,
It did.
unfortunately. And there was only 5 or 6 races on the IRL side, all ovals. So as a race car driver, I sure weren't driving very much, and you were probably still not making as much money as you were driving a CART because you're not driving that many more races. But it just goes to tell you the draw for a lot of the drivers for the 500. I mean, that's why we went IndyCar racing, right? Was for the Indianapolis 500. So then that opened up the door for a lot of other people because there was rides available for guys to come in to probably enter the 500 that probably would never have had the chance to get into a
Correct,
car
that's
to
correct.
go there from grassroots racing or dirt racing or what have you. So it was a very strange time, very stressful time. And then no matter if you're on that side that you were on, I was on this side over here, you just knew, and you knew before the split actually happened, that there was so much bad blood between the two sides, it wasn't going to be short. It wasn't going to be a year or two, so you had to make a decision. And like you said, your guys, you stayed in there. So when did you
Yeah.
come over to RL? What year was that?
2000.
2000.
2000. So I ended with Roger at the end of '99, and when it first happened, Roger called me up because it's in my contract that he puts a car at the Indy 500 for me, and he goes, Al, it doesn't look like this is going to happen. So what's
you had to
your
make a
decision?
choice,
I
yeah.
had to make a choice, yeah. And I go, Roger, I'm staying with you no matter what.
Yeah. 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 So then you went to Kelly, right?
Yeah.
Did you the first?
Yeah, I came back in 2000, 2001 with Rick Gallis. I came back to Rick and drove, tickets.com was my sponsor on one year, and then Stars, the movie channel was the second year. And then I drove for Kelly for 2 more years.
And your last IndyCar wins were with Kelly, Tom Kelly.
Yeah, 2003.
Yeah. It's, there is so much to Al's life. We've only touched a small part on it, but I know some of you probably have questions you'd like to ask Al or Scott or both of them. So we'd like to throw it out.
Sure.
What is your mental, what do you guys actually do? Do you go say a prayer? Do you go eat a pizza? Or how do you mentally prepare for the Indy 500?
Actually, it was something that I noticed with Dad and Uncle Bobby on race day mornings. They were the calmest that they were all month, was race day morning. And I finally deducted that, and that's the way it was with me, is race day morning, when you wake up race day morning, it's the beginning of the end. So at the end of this day, there's not going to be any more Indy 500 for a year, because you've just ran a month of all this stress of happening every day, and then finally, by the time you get to race day on race day morning, it's going to be over. And so I think I was pretty calm, about the whole thing, because now when we get in, we're getting in for the final time for all of this preparation of a month's worth of running, and all that is finally going to come to an answer. You're going to have an answer. Did you win or did you
And
lose?
qualifying was
So-
probably more stressful than the race. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The qualifying, getting in the show was what it was all about, and trying to get to the front of the grid where you're not having all that on the front straightaway at the beginning of the race. Going into one, you want to be in front of any mayhem that's about to happen. So
Any more questions?
It was a well-informed group.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. I think this is great. And actually, want to thank all of you for coming out here. Cody's foundation, I think, is something that she and her mom had gotten started, and it really means a lot to us that you took the time to come out and share, and to listen to these guys share just a modicum of the information they have.
I do definitely appreciate it. Cody appreciates it. She wished that she could be here, but she lives in Albuquerque, and she's actually trying to get a degree right now. So she's going to school out there and that sort of stuff. And so when I told her about this, she goes, "Really, Dad?" And I go, yep. So she sent us some information, and she was super excited about this. So she thanks you from the bottom of her heart for allowing us to do this.
Thanks,
Thank
Al.
you.
Yeah. Also, Mini Al, Little Al, Al the third. Al's not into racing at all?
No, he's now A3. As a matter of fact, that's what he's got on his license plate on his car, is A and then I, right? A3. So, no, he tried it. He wanted to do it. I think it just, in this sport, to reach the level that Scott and I reached, you have to love it. You have to sacrifice. You have to do all that, and you have to really dig deep inside you to love this sport. And I think Al enjoyed it, but he didn't love it. It wasn't his calling, let's say. And so it was for me. Once I started racing go-karts, I just loved it, and I'd do anything to drive.
Ladies and gentlemen, Al Unser Jr.
Thank you. And Scott, and Scott.
I'll sum this up by a two-time winner of the Indy 500 and a two-time runner-up of the 500. So who buys lunch next time?
The loser. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hang on 1 second. We have Al, you want to come over here a second? As a thank you, for coming tonight, and we truly, truly appreciate it. We have a little check, actually a big check here for you.
Awesome.
So, this is